everybody. What a treat we have today. Welcome to Lynchian Picks on Coffee Nick's Movie Picks, a limited series venturing into the dreamlike world of David Lynch films and black, damn fine coffee. You are listening to the second bonus episode part of this series, where we will be fast-forwarding just a bit in David Lynch's portfolio to cover the final major project of David Lynch's career, the sprawling 18-hour Twin Peaks: The Return. Please take a seat, stay a while, and let's talk David Lynch over some black coffee. Hello. Thank you so much for being here. I hope you're doing well. I appreciate you being a member of the coffee house, for tipping your barista. It is much appreciated, and I'm happy that I finally was able to put out bonus episodes for you to enjoy. So I hope you have enjoyed them. I'll be making some more in this series that you don't need to know anything about Twin Peaks to get into. Hopefully, that's the plan. That's the plan right now. So stay tuned for those. Also stay tuned for more David Lynch episodes. Tell your friends about it. Tell your little cinephile, film bro, Lynch bro friends, and Lynch girls and theys. All of your Lynch friends of, what did Rihanna say? Gender appropriations. Yeah, tell them about this show. That would be cool. But yeah, thank you for being here. I am excited and nervous to talk about Twin Peaks: The Return. I think with anything Twin Peaks, I've kind of, on this podcast, I've approached it with skepticism. Either that I won't be able to fully represent my feelings, or that I do not want to represent my feelings. And the latter is what I'm feeling with this episode specifically. I'm just doing this for fun. This will be a very, very casual, unscripted bonus episode. This is just us chatting. Don't expect any cool, crazy insights or anything. I barely have a script written here. I have a little intro. That's it. So don't expect the usual fanfare when it comes to The Return here. I just thought this would be a fitting time to bring this up. And I have been watching all of these Lynch films I'm reviewing. I've been rewatching them all over again so that they're fresh in my mind. I do this with every single review I have on the show. I always watch it again to make sure it's fresh. And I just so happened to rewatch The Return right when I was getting to this point in the show. So I thought it would be really fitting to just discuss my thoughts. It already has been 2 months since I finished rewatching it. As you all know, as I've discussed many, many times, I was listening to the Detective and the Log Lady podcast, and I rewatched the show with that podcast, which was a great time. You know what? I'm just going to link that show in the show notes for this episode. But great time was had. If you want a more in-depth or more entertaining discussion of Twin Peaks, all of it, I recommend going to that. I would love to have a whole podcast about Twin Peaks. That is like a dream of mine, but maybe one day I'll feel I have enough to contribute. Today is not the day, though. Before we get started, before we get into The Return, obviously massive spoilers for all of Twin Peaks, including The Return. For those of you who do not know, which I'm assuming if you're here, you know, but for those who do not, Twin Peaks: The Return is, I guess, season 3 in a way, although it feels like an entirely different show of Twin Peaks. It's kind of like a revival show, but I feel like even revival has connotations around it where it's I don't know, just nostalgia fest. This is nothing of the sort. I really think it is fitting to describe this as an entirely different show that just carries over some plot elements, not many. that is what Twin Peaks: The Return is. It was released in 2017, 25 years after all Twin Peaks content for the original run was over. It takes place 25 years after the original story of Twin Peaks, but I will get into that. So if you have not seen it, I would advise not listening to this. I imagine I will be getting into some spoilers. So, Reese, I know you haven't finished it, so click off. Yeah, we're calling each other out by name now. I know who's listening. I know who's not. And like I said, in this, I am just giving my overall thoughts. This is nowhere near an all-encompassing discussion of The Return. In order to do that, you would have to start your own show about The Return. But this is general overall thoughts. I don't plan on even discussing many specifics. Like I said, casual chit-chat. If you would like more Twin Peaks, though, definitely go back and listen to the bonus episode I just did on the pilot. I also touched on a little bit about the original show. And then I have 2 discussions on Fire Walk With Me. One of them is the newer one, which is a part of this series that I just released. And then there is a much older one earlier on in the original or the normal Coffee Nicks movie picks. It's really confusing how I've set this all up. I have plans. We're gonna fix that. That's far down the pipeline. However they say it, you know what I mean. But listen to any episode of this show, and I'll discuss Twin Peaks. I don't think anyone is clamoring for me to talk about this show more, which is why I am doing this because hopefully I will. I think I've just made myself sick enough of talking about it where I will not be doing that for a little bit on the show. I'm going to be taking a break from talking about Twin Peaks on the show after this. So for those of you who are annoyed as fuck with me talking about it, the end is near. The end is near. Let's just get into it. Now showing the Lynchian Picks, this is our film discussion segment diving deep into the dreamlike nightmares of David Lynch. 25 years after the events of the original seasons of Twin Peaks, Special FBI Agent Dale Cooper is released from the Red Room into a world that has fell victim to the actions of his evil doppelganger. Twin Peaks: The Return was created by Mark Frost and David Lynch and is entirely directed by Lynch. It stars Kyle MacLachlan as Dale Cooper. It originally premiered May 21st, 2017. Again, for the last time, spoilers. Now, notice how nearly everything I just said in that description was just vague, general stuff. It's not because that is what the show is about, but that is like one of 5 major plot lines here. Sometimes that doesn't even feel like the major plot line. This is almost kind of like an ensemble series. And I guess the original run of Twin Peaks was as well, but it really felt like the focus was on, Sheriff Truman, Dale Cooper, maybe like Donna, Audrey, it kind of had its focuses and everything. There were, of course, the side stories and all that, but it truly gives equal amounts of attention to all of these different plot lines. And then the ones you think it would give like a ton of attention to, it does not. And I am looking at the Audrey plot line. There is a lot happening in this, and it is a massive, massive cast. It is so hard to keep track of, and there's so many different locations. This no longer takes place in just Twin Peaks. We are going to the Dakotas. We are going to Wyoming. A lot of this happens in Las Vegas. There's even a few scenes that happen in New York. There's a few that happen in Philadelphia. There's some at the Pentagon, right on my doorstep over here. It is really quite a sprawling epic in a way. It's just very all-encompassing, and like you could see that everything that Lynch did in his career thus far kind of makes an appearance in a way in this series. I feel like everything that he's experimented with, all of the different themes and stories and like I don't know, narratives that he's made thus far kind of like find their way here. And I'm talking specifically about like the way that characters' identities just change on a dime. We're going to talk about this a lot in the Lost Highway and the Mulholland Drive episodes. But specifically talking about the last episode of this show, these characters, Dale Cooper and Diane, they just take on completely new personas without explanation. We meet Cheryl Lee for the last time, and she's playing a completely different person, we can presume, that goes by the name of Carrie Page, and Dale Cooper is trying to remind her of everything that she's been through. He drives all the way across the country to take her to her house, and she has like no recollection of anything that's happened there. I guess now that we're there, while we're on topic, I guess, just talking about the ending, I'm going way out of order here, but I think the ending makes this make sense a lot. I feel like Twin Peaks: The Return is very much about how much has changed, but how little has changed. It's like the things that matter, the things that you would have hoped watching this in 1991 or whenever, the things you would have hoped to change never did. And a lot of these characters in this show, especially the ones in Twin Peaks, mainly the ones in Twin Peaks, are acting as if no time has passed in their life whatsoever. Very few characters in Twin Peaks mark any sort of change whatsoever. In fact, many of them revert back into like their old ways. As we can see, Norma and Big Ed, they are still kind of doing this will they won't they thing that they've been doing for the past however many years, 25, maybe even more. They still have not ended up together. Shelley is still in like these awful relationships. Bobby is actually the character who has changed the most, arguably, in Twin Peaks. He's now a sheriff. No, not a sheriff. A deputy. He works at the sheriff's station. And then we see the kids of all the Twin Peaks characters, and they're sort of getting into all the same trouble that the kids in the original show got into. We meet Richard Horn. Is it Richard? Yeah, Audrey's son. We later learn is Audrey's son, and he is like horrible evil, and we kind of get like this evil seed thing with him because it is, you can assume that he is also the child of evil Cooper. But he is just like involved in all of this drug stuff, just horrible, and like just enacting like all of this violence on the town. He kills a kid unintentionally, which is, I'll talk about that scene later. But all of these awful things are still happening. We go to the Roadhouse, and there is still sex trafficking happening at the Roadhouse. There is a Renault brother there. And it's actually played by the guy who played Jacques Renault in the original seasons of Twin Peaks. He's back, and he's playing a completely different Renault character, a member of the family, but he goes by a different name. And none of the other brothers are ever referenced, which is very strange that, you know, it's like in a world where Jacques Renault never existed, and like there's this same guy going by a different name. It's very strange. But at the Roadhouse, there's still like this sex trafficking happening. There's still like drugs and all of these awful things. And then a lot of these characters we can see are still stuck in the same emotions and the same emotional, even physical spaces that they were in 25 years ago. And I think mainly of Sarah Palmer, this character, emotional and physical space, she is right there where we left her. She's in the same house. She has like sunk deep into her couch. All she does is smoke cigarettes and drink Bloody Marys and watch horrible like nature documentaries on TV where like these animals are tearing apart each other and everything. My whole point, I know I said I was going to talk about the ending and I went into this whole spiel. My whole point is that this show, its title is The Return. And it sort of advertises, it markets itself as like in an era when were so many revivals of classic TV shows, so many like nostalgia bait things. It markets itself as this grand return to Twin Peaks. And we go back and we see these characters in the exact same situations they were in 25 years ago. Still enveloped in their feelings of grief and sadness, still too insecure to pursue relationships that they want to. In many ways, this is a bleak series, much bleaker than the original. This is a town that is still deeply affected in ways that are not as obvious by the murder of Laura Palmer and the death of Leland Palmer. And I feel like Sarah Palmer is just the heart of this story. So getting back to the ending, when Carrie Page, who we can assume is a version of Laura Palmer, I don't know how to explain that really, when Dale Cooper finds Carrie Page in this alternate universe where everyone goes by a different name, he finds her and he's like, how can you not remember like your mother or your dad? Do you remember where you used to live? She's like, no, I don't remember. And for some reason, Dale Cooper thinks to help her, he could bring her back to this place of extreme torment and abuse. He takes her back to this horrible place for her, all the way across the country. I think they're in Odessa, Texas, and they go all the way up to Twin Peaks, Washington, which in many ways, that feels like the return. They are returning to this place of extreme abuse and horrible, devastating acts of violence. They're returning to this spot, and they go to the door, and the person who lives at the house is not Sarah Palmer. It is this random lady who goes by the name Chalfont. And Dale Cooper asks who lived there before them. And it was another family that went by the name of Chalfonts, I think. Or is it Tremont? One of the magic names that means something in the Twin Peaks universe. That's supposed to like sound off alarm bells. Whatever. Same difference. And, eventually Dale Cooper is like, okay, well, I have the wrong house, I think. Have a good night. They walk away, and they look up at the house, and Dale asks, what year is it? And Carrie Page looks at the house, and you can faintly hear Grace Zabriskie screaming for Laura, calling Laura's name like she did in the pilot episode, I believe. And in that moment, Carrie, she looks like she just remembers something. She doesn't know what she remembers, but she maybe remembers a feeling. It's hard to. Cheryl Lee just does a fantastic job here. Just so moving, and she's able to communicate so much with so little, and just lets out this blood-curdling, bone-chilling scream. All the lights turn off and the credits roll. And I think we finish the show. We're looking at a still. We're looking at the still, of Laura Palmer whispering something into Dale Cooper's ear. This is what we saw in episode 2 of the original show. And, the original show, they tried to say it was her saying, "My father killed me." But I really think David Lynch chose to ignore that, and she's really saying something else. And I think she's sort of saying something that caused Dale Cooper to ask, what year is it? I think she's saying something like, nothing will have changed. You would have failed. Something like very just defeating and like devastating, I think. And I think that contributes to like what I make of this show. And like I've been saying this whole time, there are so many moving pieces in Twin Peaks: The Return. This series is about so many different things. It tackles so many different subjects. But when it comes to this episode, it kind of puts all of these different topics it's discussing. It puts all of these different ideas in a box and wraps it with this giant bow, which is the ending. And I think, although this is about so many different things, I think in the end, it is about this one singular thing. In the end, the show is about Laura Palmer. Not only Laura Palmer just as a character, but it is about what she went through. This story is about the effects of what she went through, not only on her, but this whole town. And, it reminds me of the Q&A that I had with Cheryl Lee at the screening of Fire Walk With Me that one time, and how she looks at this show in its entirety as raising awareness for survivors of domestic and sexual abuse. And at the time, did I finish The Return at the time? I maybe finished it the night before I did this Q&A. So it was very fresh in my head, but as that as her saying that sat with me, I thought about this ending a lot. And I think about how since the original run of Twin Peaks came out, nothing has changed in that area. And there are still victims of these horrific acts. There are still victims of sexual and domestic abuse everywhere. In the city, in small town America, in a town like Twin Peaks, in, a town like Las Vegas. There are these victims that, we don't know what they're going through, much like Laura Palmer. They could be the homecoming queen, or they could be like Teresa Banks and no one knows them at all. We don't know either who they are, or if we do know who they are, we don't know what they're going through. And since this show originally came out, nothing has changed. And therefore, this message, this character, this story, it is just as necessary. So I feel like The Return is almost like David Lynch saying like, okay, well, you guys didn't get it the first time. I'm going to give it to you the second time. And of course it was wrapped up in a different way. But yeah, I just think of the What Year Is This as kind of like Dale Cooper admitting defeat, how he was supposed to be the guardian angel to save Laura from this horrible world she was living in. He was supposed to be the one to like defeat evil and save the day. And when he realized that Carrie Page, who resembles Laura, was still living in a world of darkness and violence and pain, he became confused what year it is. Had time moved at all? Has anything progressed? And I think Twin Peaks: The Return, it equates progression, like I guess personal, social progression, with time, and the fact that no social progress has been made, whether it be, protecting victims of abuse, or whether it be, Norma and Big Ed trying to start their relationship. No progression has been made in any of these areas. Therefore, in a way, no time has passed. And if you listen to my review of Fire Walk With Me that I just did, you know that really my main focus of that review was talking about how the whole film operates as like a representation of what we can imagine, like as a representation of Laura Palmer's feelings, her whole world folding in on itself. I think this is very much the same thing. This is Laura Palmer's world folding in on herself. And in a way, it's also Dale Cooper's world folding in on himself. I mean, he fought, I don't know about fought, I don't know the right word. He went through space and time to make it out and to try to save the day, and ultimately he failed. The character of Laura Palmer at the end of Fire Walk With Me, she was, it was so dark, but you can make the argument that she was happy after her death when she was in the Red Room with Dale and she saw the angel. in some way she found peace and happiness when she saw the angels. And for Dale Cooper to like bring her back to this place of abuse, you know, it is revealing him as a character in a really interesting way. One of my favorite parts from this show is episode 17 as well, which, you know, episode 18 is a very bleak and, you know, it's a satisfying ending, but not in like the way you would expect. It's satisfying in a very unsatisfying way, if that makes sense. But I think part 17 gives audiences kind of like a lot of what they wanted. And that in a way is almost parodying like this nostalgia fest that was happening at the time, because that episode, all of the characters kind of got in the same room and you got to see everyone reunited and everything. And there was like this Marvel movie takedown of Bob where he like was in this orb and he got punched. If you've seen it, it's ridiculous. And you probably have a lot of feelings about it, but I really do like this episode because it is almost kind of like mocking the expectations of the audience a little bit. It's like, is this really what you wanted? Is it? And I like that even in this episode, reality begins to fall apart. And there's that really interesting image of like Dale Cooper's face frozen on the screen for what must be minutes. And he slowly says, "We live inside a dream." And those are the words that Philip Jeffries said in Fire Walk With Me. And I think this is when he realized, I guess the words like reverberated with him, and he woke up. In the next episode, we see him taking on this new persona of Richard, I think his name is, and he goes to find Carrie. And it's just really cool. And I love all of the time travel elements with him going back in time to save Laura Palmer. That's what I was getting to. That's like one of my favorite parts of the show is the opening of episode 17, where he goes back in time to the night that Laura died, and he is looking at her from within the forest when she's talking to James. And, you know, if you've seen the movie, you know that she just like randomly screams at that one part. And this episode is arguing that she saw Dale Cooper in the woods. And Dale Cooper saved her, quote unquote, saved her, led her away from, you know, what was about to happen. And she disappeared as he did that. And that, I really like this one interpretation of that, her disappearing. And really, this is when everything begins to fall apart and the whole identity of the show just goes off the rails. But this one interpretation says that because she is only a TV character whose purpose was to die, the purpose of this character was to be found dead and have these effects on this town. For her to be saved, there would be no show. Which, you know, who knows? That's very meta. That's very like breaking the fourth wall and everything. And there's no way to know that is what was literally happening. But I think that's a really cool reading. I think that's a very valid reading. I kind of buy into that a little bit. Because after that, you know, all of the characters take on completely different personas. And it's almost like the actress Cheryl Lee plays a part, and she's forced into this other character similar to Laura Palmer, who has experienced like all of this violence in the world, so that now as this new character there can now be a new show. Very weird, you know. Just like I said, this is a discussion, we're just talking. It's weird. I really, really enjoy this sort of talk about The Return, though. I think The Return can be very frustrating, which I will touch on that in a second. The Return can be very frustrating, so I think that theories like this really make it a bit more entertaining and engaging. And, you know, all of this to say, at the very end, it's rumored that the lady who answers the door for Carrie and Richard is the actual owner, the real life owner of the Palmer house, which kind of just, I don't know, supports that theory that like they all switch characters or they end up in like the real world. And, you know, Dale Cooper, he witnesses that even though he technically saved Laura Palmer, there's still these awful things happening in the real world. And yeah, crazy stuff. Wow, I just really went at this backwards kind of. But I guess talking about the rest of The Return, I have a lot of issues with it, which you would not be able to guess with just everything that I just said. But it's really the first half of The Return that I have such a hard time getting through. It is really good. It's really well done, really great writing. It is enjoyable at times, but I cannot watch it at night. If I watch an episode of The Return, especially the first half at night, I will fall asleep. I will fall asleep. It is just very dry. Not in a bad way, but it is dry. There's like very little soundtrack. You know, a lot of the earlier episodes, we are just introduced to entirely new characters. We very rarely even go to the town of Twin Peaks. It's really like a lot of setup. And some of the stuff that happens is really cool. But I cannot think of that much that happens in the first half that I truly enjoy, or like a particular episode that I love. But episode 8 and onward is gold. I really enjoy every single episode after episode 7. Episode 8, I mean, you all know that is just like arguably Lynch's masterpiece. It is just a wicked episode of television. I don't even know what I have to say that would be contributing something new to the discussion on episode 8, but it is just, I'm so glad he just went for it. I love shit like that, just like experimental, and like I don't know, it's just so ballsy that he just completely took a break from the narrative of the show to just kind of like show this work of art, like this very powerful piece that is only like, I don't know, in spirit related to Twin Peaks. I mean, it gets like way out into like sci-fi and like historical, like real world stuff. And I'm so glad that he went for it and like made that connection. Yeah, I don't know what else to say about it. There's, of course, all the theories that Sarah Palmer is the little girl. Sure. But I think regardless, it is just a wonderful episode of television. Cannot believe that they greenlit that, but I'm so glad that they did. And everything after that is quite remarkable. Of course, there are a lot of slow moments, and you still in the second half have to wait for a lot of like the big moments to happen. But I think in the second half, the good stuff is a lot more frequent. I think about like a lot of the stuff with Sarah Palmer, who, like I said in the pilot review I did, she's like really the reason I was tuning in. Like when I got to her, it was like a gold nugget. Like I just hit gold. And I was like, yes, it's all worth it. And I'd get really frustrated like every time one of her scenes ended, or I don't know, towards the end, I was like, why are we not seeing more Sarah Palmer? But her stuff is just fantastic in this, and she is horrifying. Another standout moment to me is when she like snaps and she breaks the photo of Laura Palmer, the homecoming queen photo of her, and she's like stabbing the photo through the frame. It is like harrowing and very, very, very like poetic. Watching this character who has presumably been haunted by that photo for a long time now, seeing her like stabbing it and like seeing like what Laura Palmer, the idea of Laura Palmer, what she has become to this woman, is so different than what she means to like everyone else on the show, like what she means to Dale Cooper or Donna or someone like that. Yeah, and of course, the second half of the season is also when we meet Audrey. We finally return to Audrey's character, who is in a very strange situation. I don't even know if I want to get into all of that, but a lot of her time in the return, it's just spent talking to this man who we do not know, who we can assume to be her husband, and really most of the time they're just debating going to the roadhouse. Audrey is like crashing out, saying that she needs to find this person or that person, talk to this person. And this goes on for about 5 or 6 episodes, I think. And it ends in her finally going to the roadhouse, and her song comes on and she dances to it. And then like all of this violence breaks out in the roadhouse, and like her whole world starts to fall apart, and she wakes up for a brief second. We see her waking up looking at this mirror in what looks to be like a hospital, or you could even say like a mental institution. She's like become a character very similar to Laura Palmer, where her whole world has fallen apart. And we learned throughout the show that we knew this in the original run. We saw this in the original run, but it even further intensified in this gap between the original and the return. But she is also a victim to sexual and domestic abuse. And it's just horrible. So, she kind of had this strange, surreal plot line where she was a dreamer in a way, trying to escape this dark reality, go to this place where like her song plays in the bar and she just dances to it and everyone clears out of the way. Very, very strange. And although, like I said, Audrey was my favorite character on the original show. So at first I was so confused as to what David Lynch was doing with her in the return. But in the end, I think it was well worth it. I think it really is a shame, like what became of this character. I had so much hope for her, like that she'd be like a FBI agent or something. So it really is a shame to see like this just horrible place she's in. But I really do like what was eventually done with her character and how it kind of fed into the larger message of the show. Okay, some quick notes before I wrap up here. Like I said, I'm not getting into everything. I have got to put I'm not good with my expressions today. Usually I got them ready to go. I got to like put the pen down. I don't know. Quit it while it's good. Whatever. It's late. Okay, other notes I have to mention. Oh, Amanda Seyfried in this. Love to see it. Dougie Jones. I'm going to be honest. The first time I watched it, I didn't mind it. I, in fact, enjoyed it. The second time I watched The Return, I really enjoyed Dougie Jones. I thought it was so funny, and it's just so rewarding to see it pay off in the end. Of course it drags on. It goes on forever. But I think we see as much Dale Cooper, like normal Cooper acting in his full senses and everything. We see as much of that as we need to. I don't know if we needed to see any more of that. I think anything more than that would really be kind of like milking the nostalgia cow, if that makes sense. So I really enjoy Dougie Jones. I mean, this is a character who is trapped in some like paranormal like limbo for the past 25 years. So to me, it always made sense that like he just, I don't know, lost his capabilities. He lost his ability to speak and to react. So it always made sense to me. I always thought his scenes were really interesting. I enjoy Dougie Jones. A standout for me was also Harry Dean Stanton playing Carl Rod. That was a character who I expected to just not come back after Firewalk with me, but he had quite a part in The Return. And I think specifically of the scene where he goes into town and is just like enjoying his day, and he witnesses Richard Horne. Is his name Richard? Audrey's son. Whoever Audrey's son is. He witnesses him kill a child on the streets. And Carl Rod like watches the soul of this child like float into space. And it's such a strange and like disturbing scene. It's so emotional and moving. And I really don't cry a lot during The Return, but this scene in particular always like gets me to shed some tears. It's just very beautiful, and I really like what they did with the character of Carl Rod. Like he's just like one of the good guys in the Twin Peaks universe, and I think he shows like even someone who sets out to do good and enjoy the world, they will still like witness things like this, and it's so heartbreaking. But even, despite witnessing this, this character still like sets out to like make a positive impact on like the people that live in his trailer park, or like other people he comes across, which I think is really cool. What other things do I really like? Nadine, of course, duh. She owns her small business now. Norma, love. Shelley, everything with Bobby is really cool. Oh, I also love that scene where there's like traffic in Twin Peaks, and there's that little boy shoots that gun, and Bobby walks out of the diner, and the little boy's like standing there with like his hip popped and his like hand on his hips and everything, and he looks so sassy. And this little boy like almost killed someone, and there's like all this traffic in Twin Peaks for some reason, and Bobby goes to this lady who will not stop honking her horn, and she's like screaming at Bobby and saying, we're gonna be late, she's sick. And it proceeds to be like one of the scariest scenes of all time. This little girl like starts spewing like green vomit all over her. It is so wacky, but so good. It makes no sense. I love it. I love this shit. And this is also something, they talked about this on The Detective and the Log Lady a lot, but Twin Peaks: The Return, it had a gift in predicting kind of like what the social temperature would be like in the 2020s. This was filmed in 2014 and it was released in 2017. So I like to think that like the social temperature got really hot around 2016, and there was kind of like this new era of like extreme polarization in America. And in a way, I think that David Lynch and Mark Frost kind of had their finger on the pulse of this, and they were able to see it coming, even without like COVID happening and everything, which I think COVID really like set in stone this divisiveness and this polarization in the country. Even without that, I think that Lynch and Frost were still able to tap into this. And throughout a lot of The Return, they were able to illustrate this sense of like American paranoia and dread and distrust, kind of like just everything about like the American dream and like what America is supposed to stand for is subverted in the America of Twin Peaks, and arguably in the America we're living in right now. I feel like Twin Peaks: The Return predicted kind of like what the social temperature would be like. And I feel like that's always what Twin Peaks set out to do. The whole point of Twin Peaks is that it was showing like these horrible things, these secrets, this abuse, this violence. It all happens under the guise of small town America. And I think that is where the character of Dale Cooper was just wrong, where he was inherently wrong from the very beginning. Is he always saw Twin Peaks as black coffee, cherry pie, Douglas firs, a place of like happiness and comfort and like solitude, when in fact it was never any of those things. And he, in a way, he was like trying to restore Twin Peaks to that image he had in his head. But it never was that. And Twin Peaks, in reality, it was always just a representation of America, and how in America there is always something dark lurking underneath the surface of something promising and beautiful. I think that's where I should end it. I think that's a good stopping point. And in fact, it's good that I said that, because I didn't even write like a little full review. So take that as the full review. I am going to give Twin Peaks: The Return a Nick pick. At one point in time, I would have been tempted to give this a Nick mix, I will be honest, but I think I've moved on from that. And like, although this series can be so frustrating, I think it is perfect. I would not have it any other way, and I love it dearly, although it is so frustrating at times. And I'm so grateful that Lynch just got to pursue his vision here without any limits. I think like a lot of directors, it is frustrating when they're sort of handed a blank check. I've seen this with Ari Aster and Eddington and how frustrating that movie was. And I think like some directors these days, we need to kind of rein them in a bit. But Lynch, he is, of course, he was one director that I think should have always been given full control. And I'm so glad that he was given that for Twin Peaks: The Return, because he was able to create something so abstract, so special, so unique. There is nothing has ever been so unique. He was able to create this show, which I'm so grateful for. And I think that it's just perfect. I would not have it any other way. Is it a favorite? Is it something I will return to all the time? Not exactly, but I do think of this as something incredibly special. All right, everyone. I thought this would be like a 30-minute episode, but here I am yapping for 50 minutes now. Sorry about that. But just like that, the Twin Peaks week is over. I know that was a little longer than a week because I fell behind. I lacked motivation, so I'm sorry about that. It wasn't quite as crisp and clean cut as I hoped, but I feel like I was able to do justice, some amount of justice to my feelings for all of these different Twin Peaks whatever. You know what I mean. So thank you for tuning in and for talking about Twin Peaks with me. You know I enjoy doing that. I will be taking a break from doing that on the show, so don't worry. But hopefully one day I will be back on my bullshit talking about Twin Peaks. This was so nice. I had a really nice time talking about Twin Peaks. You know, Fire Walk with Me is my favorite Lynch thing ever. It's my favorite also Twin Peaks item is Fire Walk with Me. So this was really exciting, and I'm always happy to revisit it and to learn something new from it. Thank you for tuning in. Thank you for allowing me to do this once again. Thank you for being a regular member. That's really nice as well. If you like what you heard, of course, please subscribe, drop me a rating, and tell a friend about me. Tell them to subscribe to the Patreon to become a regular. That would be so nice. And also a special thank you to Nathan Moore for creating the show's opening and closing themes. Until next time, Dougie Jones.